James Maurelle On Site is an exhibition that was selected through our artist nomination process. Exhibiting artists at CUE are selected via a hybrid process which consists of solo exhibitions by underrepresented artists nominated and curated by well-established artists, alongside a series of solo and group exhibitions selected by an annual open call jury. We've been honored to work with artist Odili Donald Odita as the nominator and curator-mentor to James Maurelle. On Site consists of sculptures and prints crafted from materials such as wood, metal, and found objects that weld form and function with Black cultural histories. Through a formal engagement with the vernacular derived from Black American traditions of making and African woodworking traditions, the work celebrates methods of defiance and achievement in the face of oppressive systems and structures. James Maurelle is an interdisciplinary artist. Sculpture, video, photography, and sound art are his analog and digital primes. His work has been shown in solo and group exhibitions in New York, Minneapolis-Saint Paul, Austin, Philadelphia, New Orleans, Richmond, Cincinnati, and San Francisco. Maurelle received his BFA from the San Francisco Art Institute and his MFA from the University of Pennsylvania. He was a recipient of the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture Fellowship in 2015. Odili Donald Odita is an abstract painter whose work explores color, both in the figurative historical context and in the socio-political sense. He is best known for his large-scale canvases with kaleidoscopic patterns and vibrant hues, which he uses to reflect the human condition. He has presented exhibitions at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, the Institute of Contemporary Art, Miami, and the New Orleans Museum of Art, among other institutions. Odita is represented by Jack Shaman Gallery here in New York. And now it's my pleasure to hand it over to James Maurelle and Odili Donald Odita.
Thank you, Lily. Thank you also for this invitation to do this presentation, James. When I got the call to do this curatorial mentorship program, I decided to just interview James. We had maybe a 2-hour talk recorded, and just super interesting because of the way in which he spoke about his work with the passion that he has, the passion he carries in the making of his work, as well as the stories, the family history that he was able to just talk about and explain. The migratory history of his family from one space, one state to another within America, and just to understand how all of that goes into the making of his work. And I hope that we do get a chance to be able to speak about some of that history, James, because I think it's very important to understand what your grandfather, what your father, and what you do now, how it all connects, and essentially to know a bit about the different places that you and your family have lived in America, and you're coming to Philadelphia. Yeah. I'm going to just continue, James, and then I'm going to give it to you with the questions. I was asked by the Q Art Foundation to select an artist for their curator-mentor series. I had many people to choose from anywhere in America, and I took my time to think about who would best benefit from this opportunity provided by Q. Over a process of time and with a lot of deliberation, I chose James Maurelle. It served many purposes to select James, not only because of the dedication he has for his artistic practice, not for the varied range of media sensibilities he has and is engaging in his work. I felt that as an artist who is also working in Philadelphia, James carries within him a history that is very much aligned with the migratory history of African Americans. And additionally, in my opinion, James makes a new and spirited connection to art making traditions that are intrinsically African and which have been carried over from centuries ago to America. He brings new life and new contexts to the manipulation of wood, be it references to gang violence or police brutality or world indifference to the accomplishments of Black people. James Maurelle is striving to find a new space of poetics in his dialogue with history and with a present understanding of the world in which he lives. Some of my questions today derive from research on the work and spoken words of Roxane Gay. I recently listened to a podcast she gave on ArtNet News, The Art Angle, titled, "What Art Can Teach Us About Trauma and Healing," in which she also gives a shout out and a mention to James's current show at the Q. A specific question she poses, in which has my interest, is as follows. How does our suffering become your entertainment? Or why does our suffering become your entertainment? Jillian, if you could post the links in the chat so everybody else can get a chance to, at a later time, to listen to the podcast. So my first question to you, James, is how do you mediate the space between images of suffering as others' entertainment and the display of atrocity as self-knowledge and self-empowerment? And I'm thinking of the display of Emmett Till's broken body as an action for public change versus everyday media abuses of the Black body in those kinds of representations.
Wow, Odilee, right?
It's all there. I'm not asking anything odd. It's all there.
Well, first I want to give thanks to the ancestors, right? Have a moment, right? Standing on the shoulders of, push that forward. Then I can start with my sister, Tiana. I'm calling her out because we were on a panel a couple years ago, and I didn't know her, right? She was sitting right next to me. She called me out on my work, and she said, but I think someone gave her a question. She was like, "Well, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about what's the deal with James's work and the restraint, right? The restraint in the work, or having to deal with, right, or tussle with making these objects, right? And when it happens, when it comes, I have to listen, right? I've learned over the years to really listen to the materials, right? To pay attention to my hands, right? I don't even wear gloves like I should. I hurt my hands, but I want to be close to materials, right? To touch the materials. No in between, right? But to be mindful of my body, right? And the objects that I feel that are these objects that have been recycled, but they not have lost their purpose, right? Just within a certain sector, right? But this recycling or renewal that I'm interested in. So it's a nothing ever really is thrown away, or nothing really ever dies. So the work, when we're dealing with the body or someone else's body, or possession, or ownership, it's something that I really I take heed to. But listening is something that I'm learning more with the materials and the work, but also more to myself, because it's a lot to factor in. There's a lot to mediate, for sure.
Right. I want to have a follow-up question to this. How do you manage the space between Black celebration and Black suffering in the work as you make it? And I am thinking of this in relation to a recent article by Gwendolyn Du Bois Shaw on Hyperallergic about Dina Lawson, the many problems with Dina Lawson's photographs, and how Black artists can assist in perpetuating the atrocity of abuse against the Black body instigated by mainstream arts and media institutions. And the link is in the chat for those who want to see that article by Gwendolyn Du Bois Shaw. But there is a problem, I think, sometimes when Black artists can perpetuate pain without finding any resolve for it, and how they can actually surmount representations of pain and speak to or address accomplishment even with those kinds of images. And I see your work, and I see that you're dealing with a lot of issues of cultural pain, and yet you're able to make something that we can call beautiful. We can call it beautiful. So how do you mediate that? Thinking about the ways in which you are actually addressing some of the things you experienced or that you know of within the Black community and within society at large.
Man, Odilee, serious, right? It's raw,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna answer it as best as I can, and
Mhm.
it's a very humbling situation to talk about one's work and the intimacy, even though there are people watching, it's being recorded.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I'm gonna be open and raw with it. It's these questions, right? How do we deal with submission, right? How do we deal with this brutality, not just what's happening on the exterior, but also the interior that we carry,
Mhm.
right? Um, how does one? I mean, when you're a kid, right? You can get a spanking, pop on the bum bum, you know. But as you get older, they turn into ass whoopings. Part of my language. How does
Mhm.
one take an ass whooping and get up and continue on and to go forward?
Mhm.
There's so many things that we have to deal with, individually and also collectively.
Mhm.
Right? But I make it a serious effort to celebrate, not just my lineage, but everyone's lineage in that sense.
Mhm. Mhm.
Just Tiana, so I send out texts, you know, she's my heroine, right? And I celebrate her. My brother Charles, right?
Mhm.
I celebrate, you know, he's my hero. Odilee,
Mhm.
constantly, putting me on, right? And to keep that dialogue going, right? But in the studio and making work, it's it's the materials, right? It's once again it's listening, but also the
Mhm.
relationship that I have with my hands that started with my granddad and my father, right? The respect of my hands, to
Mhm.
know right from left, how they work together, right? Know when to stop, right? Know when to listen, know when to cry, right? Which is something I'm still learning how to do, right? So the studio is, to me, studio is a spiritual space. It's a sacred space, right? It's a space of mourning. It's a space of growth, right? It's that move, right? That unknown. It's like this jump into the abyss,
Mhm.
nothingness,
Mhm.
right? And finding one's way out, right? To create the joy of creating and the what it takes, but it's also a lot of fear, right? And fears and doubts, right? But to keep pushing and to keep creating that joy, right? That child in oneself, that wonder. Basically, I'm fighting and holding on for dear life to my wonder, my childhood, my child wonder, right?
But you can also say beautiful too, and one could say that your work is beautiful, very beautiful. And first of all, how do you understand this term in relation to or in context of your work?
Mm,
How do you engage it if it's something that you think about while you're making your work, while you're investigating histories and cultural trauma that might be connected to
mm.
personal histories and so forth? I mean, is it just a term that comes after the fact of the work, or is it an idea that you try to imbue as you make the work?
Wow. Um,
Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're just getting some feedback from the audience that people can't hear James very well. So James, do you mind just trying to speak up a little bit?
okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Uh, beauty, beauty. The intent, right? The primer, right? Um, the only way I can best define that, where it was a discovery for me, is when I was an undergrad, and I was in a certain place in my life. I was in a certain place in my life, and I needed some assurance, right? And I was in a bad place. I was in trouble. But it was one day that I was walking. It's in San Francisco at the Institute, and I was walking up all those hills, and I left my apartment. I was living. It was apartment. It was like a room. I was living under someone's house in Pacific Heights in the basement with rats and all that. And I walked outside in the front door, and there was a woman who saw me, and she was smiling as she was walking down the hill. She was wearing like a jumpsuit, like she was exercising or something. And she walked up. She started telling me about myself in a roundabout way, and I didn't know what was happening. I thought it was a joke, right? And she's like, "You go to school?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I go. I'm at the institute." She's like, what are you doing at the institute?" It's like, "Oh, film." She's like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sure." She's like, "Okay, okay. Well, that can change, right?" And I'm like, "No, because I'm just thinking about film." Then she told me, like, "James, promise me something." Um, yeah. She said, "Always make beautiful things." And I'm like, "Okay." And we walked a little bit, and she said her name was Morrell. And she walked down the hill, and I watched her walk. I was like, "What was that about?" Right? And she just disappeared. I don't know what that was. I'm still trying to
Mhm.
understand it. Right?
You never saw her again?
I never saw her again.
Mhm.
Matter of fact, she knew my name, and I'm like, "What's going on?"
Mhm.
Right? So whatever that may mean or whatever it may be, but this sense of or this notion of like beauty in what I make, it's the trauma, right? The destruction, the brutality, right? How do you rise? How do you create? How do you find that something? It's like you're bringing out like self. You're really dealing with it, and I can't specifically pinpoint and tell you, right? I'm making, I'm purposely making beautiful things. I'm just making. I just make, and I listen to jazz or I have John Coltrane on a loop,
Mhm.
right? And I go
Mhm.
through this routine. I submit to the materials and what's happening, right? And every day is a new day. Every day in the studio is a new day, right? And then I go on to the next and continue to look for the next stage so I can create and make more things.
Mhm. Now I'm gonna transition over to the slideshow to present work that's in the show to see your beautiful things. Let me just move over to the desktop. Okay. All right. And we can talk about these works with whatever you want to say as you see the images.
Hmm.
Okay. This is the show as it is now. We're going to look at the individual pieces as we go through. You brought a lot of work down into the space,
Yes, yes, I
but
appreciate
somehow it's living well together.
it. Hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, this work passage, could you talk just very briefly about it? Just why is it titled Passage?
Yeah. Passage, right?
Mhm.
Just thinking about this residue, right? Just thinking just that Atlantic Ocean and what it holds,
Mhm.
right? The passage to make the passage, right? To survive it. What exists? What can grow from this, right?
Is this piece the thing that holds the form that holds all the dowels? Is that one piece of wood, and did you find it somewhere, or how did that come to be right there?
Yes, one piece of wood. Um, it's a shape, right? And then, 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 slowly formed, right? Just listen to the materials, let the material, let the piece guide me, right? I knew I wanted to deal with, souls, right? People, right? What is growth? What is atrophy, right? Stages of growth, stages of death, right?
Two odd materials you have, blood and seaweed. How do they play in this?
Yeah, what I have this relationship with tools, but my hands and the materials. Every time I go into the studio, it's always this negotiation of a possibility of like death,
Mm-hmm.
or hurting myself, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which I do. So it's something that I accept.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I hurt myself really good on this piece.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I bled onto it and into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can see a little bit about the tip on the tip of the dowel, but
Mm-hmm.
also just seaweed. I stamped seaweed or punched seaweed in the holes and filled them up, right, as a material. It's
Mm-hmm.
just slowly, you know, formed and shaped itself. Once again, it's just listening to the materials.
Mm-hmm. You have here Triple Crown,
Mm.
and you said it's game, set, match.
Yes.
This, yeah, and it seems to be referencing this next piece,
Yeah.
Saint Althea.
Saint Althea. Yeah.
Can you just mention briefly how you
Um,
found this image?
yeah. Found this image online. Althea is someone that's always been a part of my practice. Um, so many great things about Althea, but also tragedy, right? In the age of so many amazing tennis players, but she's one that I hold dear, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I I wanted to saint her. I mean, like who am I to saint someone? But she's definitely a patron saint.
Her full name is Althea.
Althea Gibson.
Yes, she was a tennis player who.
Yeah, tennis player. She was the first. She was the goat, right? French Open, U.S. Open. It was amateurs before it was like a professional event, right? And also Wimbledon.
In the 650s, in the 50s.
Yeah, and she there's a documentary on PBS about her, a couple of books,
Mm-hmm.
right? And she also has a foundation here in Philadelphia that I recently.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Then there's this piece, Ama. I'm saying it correctly, Ama.
Yes, Mama. Yeah.
Why Ama? What is that
Mama,
reference?
Molly, egg, rebirth, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's internal, external, right? Something that holds, right? This life form,
Mm-hmm.
this source, right? It's still it's something that one of the few beginning pieces that I made, and it was a great big piece of tree. Once again, I found
One piece that you
one
you.
one one piece. It was like twice, almost three times as big as it is
Mm-hmm.
now.
Mm-hmm.
But
And it's not small.
no, it's not small.
Mm-hmm.
um, I, I I worked. I took my time and worked at it, and took my time, and from the edges and the rounding, and just to yeah, how it stands,
Mm-hmm.
how it sits in space.
And it supports itself.
Yes, it supports itself.
Well, this is karaoke. Is it karaoke? Okay.
Yeah, carioca. It's a native people who are native of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil,
Mm-hmm.
which I love. A lot of folks who know or may not know, it's like Brazil is always that place for me, and I'm a fanatic footballer.
Mm-hmm.
I love football.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I love the Arsenal. Right, Arsenal's North London is red. If a lot of folks won't agree, don't believe, but also Flamingo in Rio.
And it's also made with blood, earth, and sugar cane, as well
Blood,
as
earth, sugarcane, skin.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. This one is an amazing piece. Angename
Mhm.
Kenis making. Pleased to meet you.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a greeting, the Flemish, right? It's the histories of the Congo and watching it, right?
Hmm. Yeah, like a TV media bodies. There's a shelf that comes open in the lower part of it.
Yeah, it's just watch what happened, see what happened,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Sometimes it's people just we watch,
Hmm.
right?
Interestingly, it doesn't plug into the wall. It just sits there.
No.
And then this installation shot here of Bambara Une.
Mhm. Bombardment. Mhm.
It's an amazing piece. It looks like a hand,
Mhm.
like a rooster or a bird, and a mask or a portrait of a face at the same time.
Mhm. This piece was it was one piece.
Hmm.
I can barely remember the object. It was one piece, and I accidentally knocked it over off of my workbench, and it broke in a million pieces, like a whole bunch of pieces, and slid across the floor, kind of almost into a corner,
Hmm.
and it formed that exact shape. It's like the pieces danced, right? It's like if you drop some marbles,
Hmm.
and it danced around and flipped like dice, right?
Hmm.
And it was expanded, but it shaped just exactly how it is now. And I freaked out, and I immediately called my wife and sent her a picture. And she said, "Don't touch it, don't. That's it." And I said, "Yeah," but I added my little 2 cents at the neck, so I don't know if
Yeah,
she really likes that too much, but yeah.
that's amazing. You sense something there. That's amazing. It's really great. This piece, Cold Stone.
Mm.
And why did you situate the two pieces together like this?
Well, folks who have gone or seen the show, there's like this walkabout,
Hmm.
square or a rectangle, but this is kind of like the start. I'm dealing, with the body on the left side, and we're really starting to go a little bit more darker into like this violence, right? That's happening, and this piece also was a found object. Um, Walking around, I saw it, and I was late going to class, and I didn't have any time, so I thought I was gonna come back and pick it up, and then I forgot about it for a couple of days until I had to go to class again, and I said, "Oh my God, I forgot about this piece," and I
Hmm.
picked it up. It was from a demo, um, and it just shaped it. I don't know if anyone may know or not, but it's a sniper rifle magazine.
Hmm. Hmm. And this alludes to a lot of your other work where you have objects that makeshift as crutches and machine guns,
Mm.
scythes and masks,
Mm-hmm.
other things like that. Or like this, B. Natchez.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this seems to double as one of those like stockades one of those devices that hold people and trap them.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Um,
But it's a body form at the same time with the hole and the arms
mm-hmm.
and the nails. So a lot of your work is dealing with found materials. It seems you're finding things and you're adopting them into your way of making and into a way of thinking through them.
Mm-hmm. Found objects, Philadelphia. Like wow, a little shout
Mhm.
out to the folks at Rare, Bill Dufala, who get a chance to walk the yard, and also gifted, you know, materials and things, you know, my way.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Mhm. This is a Figures of Thought, fall 2013. There's a special story or elements between these instruments and
Hmm.
this framing device that you have around the instruments. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, or just
Yeah. Well, folks, you know who are figures of thought. That was my first class in the fall of 2015 that I took with my mentor and my brother Terry Atkins. Um, yeah, it's emotional.
Mhm, mhm,
Yeah, I thought about this piece while I was in grad school.
mhm,
The materials, I've had the materials, the top and the bottom, the horn, and up on top for since 2014.
mhm,
But it didn't manifest until the beginning of this year. But I've been thinking about it, sketches, drawing. I draw to remember because so many things that go on in one's head. And I've journaled since I've been a child,
mhm,
just to recall my dreams.
mhm.
Right?
I've only seen very few drawings. So do you make a lot of drawings?
Yeah. Little journals of,
Mhm,
of drawings, all in all around it in my house, in my book bags, all my book bags, and carry
mhm,
on something I
mhm,
can draw and I can sketch it. But this piece is Terry.
mhm.
Terry. Um, that's I miss him.
Yeah, he's a great presence in Philadelphia and in New York when I first met him years ago. And it was a shock to have his passing come too quick and too soon. Yeah. This piece, They,
Mm-hmm.
2020. And I'm sorry I don't have an alternate shot of it singularly, but it's a really interactive piece.
Mm-hmm.
And you call it They, which I find it's a very appropriate title, very good title. Is there something that comes with what we're seeing in the object in that title?
Yes, it's collective, this union, right?
Mhm. Mhm. It's like a spinning union of two chairs just spinning together. There will be some other studio shots, installation shots where we can see this image in other views. Edson, 2020.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen this piece before, even before in your studio and elsewhere. It's like it's something that it's almost like a Rubik's cube from you know so many different artists' practices and so many different histories. You have here so many different things happening on the top with the pointed elements, the drawers that come out, the facial aspects, sculptural aspects to it, the
Mm-hmm.
furniture aspects. Is it something that is one singular story or multiple stories involved within a piece like this?
Yeah, it's multiple stories, but just to circle back and this brutality or suffering. How does one suffer? How does one deal with a certain type of responsibility? Edson, folks know him as Pele, the great Pele, the footballer in Brazil.
Mhm,
And as a child, he had the responsibility of going to town and shoe shining.
mhm,
And he was really young. He was the breadwinner, if you will. That type of suffering, having to do one's duty, not just your survival, but your family and other survival and your lineage, right? And I was making this piece, and I pretty much finished it. But just the torture of it all, but also meditation, right? But to give it this power, you can always walk away. It's a choice, right? With stages of choice, or power, or walk, agency to walk away.
mhm.
Um, but on Netflix, they had it was a documentary about him and his life. And
Pele.
yeah, about Pele. And after I finished the piece, and and I watched it, and as I was watching it, he's telling the story about as a child and having to shine shoes, and when someone handed him a shoe shine box and he started beating on it, it became an instrument, right?
Hmm.
And I immediately realized like this was talking to me
Hmm.
before I knew this about him, right? So they go forward, they go backwards and back, again. And I immediately, I sent a picture to Lily. I told Lily about it and also sent a clip, right? But it was just really humbling coming across that. Mhm.
Yeah, I love also just to quickly say I love the marking in here, the drawing that you find naturally in the work of in how you put the work together. Um, it's uh it's amazing what you're doing here. Also, this situation with the feet,
Mhm.
the selection of all of this is just incredible. The color and choice you have, the shapes you have, and the forms and how they work with each other. Yeah, this is skyhooks.
Yeah. Skyhooks, 7 feet 2 inches. It's an homage to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Um, it was a moment when I saw when his home burned down and he was interviewed. He was outside of his home and he was talking about his home. People were talking about his home burning down, and he said, well, yeah, my home, but my dad's jazz collection, all my records, right? And that was the primer of making the piece. Just the pain in his voice, right? Just the records, right, that you pass on, or folks who know about records or into records,
Mhm.
and how they're passed on. You know, these timetables, these timestamps, and one song can remind you exactly where you are at a certain period of time, right?
Mhm.
And
Right.
just bass, skyhooks. His famous skyhook is indefensible, right? But it's also a jazz term, cutting heads. When you're playing it,
There's
you
a scythe aspect. There's a
catching.
sight rather. There's a scythe aspect to this, and there's like these are like teeth, in as much as masks of death or masks of
Mm,
some kind of ominous thing happening that's going to happen.
mhm.
This is workstation, and on here you have Fred, the piece Fred on the table. You have your jacket and your hat, and
Mhm.
this other piece called Who's Next,
Yeah.
with Friday Night sitting on top of it.
Mm.
Did you, with your performance, could you talk briefly about what you did in your performance there with the table?
Yeah. Performance. Once I moved it from away from the wall so I can walk around it. My brother Charles is like James, you need room. So after I moved it away from the wall, it was process, right?
Mhm.
I wanted it's a situation where you to create this atmosphere, right? Or this openness to see how an artist really works, right? To share that. That's it's really scary,
Mhm.
right? And it's intimate, right? But after I forgot that the camera was there and it's just me being me. But to go through the process of making, right? I made a couple of pieces and I prepped for other pieces, but the labor, you know, the intensity to hold that, it's like a rocket, right? That first stage burn, it's like you trying to get out of the atmosphere, right? But I had to hold that first stage burn for 24 hours.
Mhm. I don't know
And
how you did it, but you did it. You did it. Do you have
and
it?
yeah.
Yeah. you have this piece here, Friday Night, and this seems to be a really intimate piece, not only in the way it gauges the other piece that it's sitting on, who's next, but it's like just this idea of what activity might be going on Friday night in someone's household. These pieces doubling as figures and doubling as figures of action.
Yes, Friday night. Growing up, aunts, siblings, my mother. I grew up in a Seventh-day Adventist home. So, next day, Shabbat, Saturday, you go to church.
Mm-hmm.
So all the hair, all the prepping is the night before.
Mm-hmm.
Friday was that time that I would see, so many processes and so many things like happen, with my mom and how what is you know what my mom had to go through, right, growing up at a certain period of time,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing how she created and what she would do with her hair, right? And I knew this is in conversation with Althea, because a lot of folks don't know that Althea was a champion ping pong player before she was a tennis player,
I
right?
didn't know. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is it still kind of is today. When you make it to the final, right, a woman's final, right, you'd always play on, we play on a Saturday, right? And so if you even go to a hairdresser, or you did your hair yourself, and with Althea, her hair is like so beautiful, and I assume that she did it herself and maintained it herself, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that would all happen on a Friday night if she had to play a final on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
So this upkeep and this beauty, right? That I'm just so into. I just that image, right? But to see the process, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I've done, I've done hair. I've had, I've done my own hair. I've done my sister's hair. So I know it's like that hot comb. It's like it's no joke.
No, it's not a joke. It's not a joke. I've seen years of that
On your
myself.
ears and on the forehead,
Oh
like
my
I have in
goodness.
here.
Oh my goodness. It's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this image here of Lou Alcindor, who later is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. This official image by Richard Avedon here was used in a painting. You found it and used it in the painting that was stunning, in my opinion. And once it was on view, we had the Q had issue with the estate. And actually, Lily, if you can speak to this a bit, we can just talk through this and get to the last few slides I had.
Yeah, so it started in June of 2020. James reached out to me and told me that he was planning to make some work that was inspired by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and his legacy. And he asked if I would reach out to him via Q and just try to let Kareem know, who James was, what he was doing, and that he was having this exhibition at Q. At that time, actually, we were not even sure when the show would happen. It was originally scheduled for September 2020, but because of the pandemic and our closure at Q, we had to push it back quite some time. But I reached out and I was able to make contact with one of his managers, who actually emailed me back the same day that I reached out to her, and was very nice and said, please pass along images of the work, and we'll share it with. I'll make sure that Mr. Abdul-Jabbar sees it. So it took kind of a while, since the show was delayed till September of 2021. It took a while to kind of get those images ready. But I followed up with her again this last summer, letting her know that the show was in fact happening, sending some information on it, the press release, catalog links, etc. And an image of skyhooks as well, inspired by Kareem. But at that point, James had not yet completed the images using that Avedon photograph. I didn't get a response to that email, and then I followed up again once the show was installed, sent along an image of the power triptych, again at James's request, so kind of talking about that with him, and got a response kind of immediately to that email, asking us to take that work down and saying that Kareem did not want his image being used in that work, and that we needed to stop showing that image.
So we have here the images as they are now in the exhibition. The amazing paintings, the work that was done was brilliant, and it spoke to the text here. Because of time, I'm not going to read it. I have left it up here for those of you who had time to read it to read. But there were three things that he saw in the work and he thought of when he was making the work. You had ball, legs, and arms. And in the piece, he adorned the image with gold, fractured gold elements around, on, and in these parts and forms of the image on these three paintings. Stunning work. We worked with hanging them. They were difficult to hang. They presented the athlete as he is here. When he was 17 years old, this picture was taken. He was, even at that time, one of the most important basketball players in the world. That leather belt shows that strength of him that he carried in that picture. And James did this stunning work. And then we had the dilemma of being forced right in the first week of taking that down. James came up with a brilliant solution with this cloth covering the image, covering the piece. If you come close to this cloth in the exhibition, I ask all of you to go see it. You will see the translucency, and you will see elements of the image through the cloth, and also the gold leaf, the gold work protruding through the cloth and giving its own sculptural formation within the body of this work. So there's a sense of tragedy, but there's also a sense of, I think, brilliance and wonder in the way that this work still stands and rests in this space. And James, could you say anything about what it was like? I mean, I know this process was hard for you, coming to terms with the idea of, intellectual property and so forth. And we don't even know if Kareem Abdul-Jabbar knows that this work is up. And you want to be able to, you made this in commemoration for him and possibly even wanting to give it to him. But how did you come up with that brilliant solution to resolve the show and resolve the work as in this way? And what do you think about how it elevates the process of the meaning of what this is as an object, what these are as objects? In so many ways, you have commemoration in this piece. You have something for Terry, you have something for Althea, and you have something for Kareem, and for others in your life. Really, commemorations to trauma, let's say, to certain kind of downfalls in certain people's lives, but at the same time, this shows not only like a memoriam, it's also a celebration of greatness. It's really a celebration of greatness. And this is what I see so well done in this exhibition. And it's powerful. It brings almost tears to my eyes when I think about how well done this show is and all that you put into it. So I'm going to ask you just simply, how did you come up with this black cloth? And how did you find such intellectual, intelligent, and passionate resolve for what you did here?
I have to the stages of grief, right?
Mm-hmm.
The stages of grief at first, must have to be forthcoming, right, and to be open with it. At first, I was thinking about redacting, and I was
Mm-hmm.
upset, and I was angered, right,
Mm-hmm.
and this sense of mourning washed over me, and
Mm-hmm.
so the process of like it was humbling, It was
Hmm.
humbling and also humiliating in a sense because of my gall and audacity to think like, I'm the guardian of this black body, right? I'm the one. I choose myself, right?
Hmm.
But the process of, like death and mourning, how does one prepare, how do you prepare a body, to go to the next level, to go to the next stage, right?
Hmm.
And to enshroud, right?
Hmm.
To deal with that intimacy, right?
Hmm.
To tend to someone's body,
Yeah.
right? That vessel, right? So that emptiness or that that nothingness, right?
That
Yeah,
void of
that
black.
void, right? I fully entered in and I struggled with what I was going to do, not as a response, but just like covering up, also, I also feel shame,
Mm.
right? Sorry for being emotional about it. Right? Um, up until the doors closed at the queue, I was waiting. I was waiting for him to enter. Right? My hero. Still, regardless, right?
He was awesome.
I, you know,
Yeah.
it's raw, but it's
Yeah.
something that I've learned from and I'm learning from. Right? It's just everything that I wrote, about the triptych, the power triptych.
Hmm.
It's there, and,
Hmm.
and it's me, and I'm exposed, so be nice to me. But yeah.
Yeah. These last few images are just of the installation of the work. And I think it also, there's a lot of learning in the way in which your work can be on view in the space. We moved a lot of things. Some things went to the floor off pedestals. Um, I think it was just really a great process all throughout. I've never experienced the things you experienced in this putting up together the show. I've never experienced any of these things in this way. And I think for you in this exhibition, you really surmounted all the challenges that came to you in this way, and you still had a beautiful show. It's not like we lost a beautiful show because we had to take something out or change things. We got even a more beautiful show. You got a more beautiful show out of it and out of this whole process. So I just I just want to thank you for this journey and of watching you grow and watching you put everything together and having faith that it would be up
Mm,
because anything can happen at any time.
mm,
But we have to also put faith in what we do and know that it will happen. And it has happened. And we can see it now. Last two slides, studio object. And you can talk about what this is and how it might have helped you along in your passage
mm.
from your studio in Philadelphia to New York City, the Q Art Foundation.
Yeah, this is an object of the Don people mask, but this is a passport mask for travelers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was gifted this by a brother at Clark Park in Philadelphia. I
Mm-hmm.
bought two. Well, I bought one, right, and that was in my studio, like as a guardian around the border of my studio.
Mm-hmm.
But this one sits close to, on my desk, and it was gifted to me. He said, "Here, you need this.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't have any money. I don't have any more money." He said, "No, this is for you." And I took it, and it's traveled with me, and from Philadelphia to New York at the Q, and on my workbench, and it'll come back. So I was very fortunate and gifted at just what that may, what it is, and what it holds, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. It's just, I mean, I've constantly have been in contact with these amazing people. I'm gonna, the people who are here, you see the names and shout them out.
Mm-hmm.
Carolyn Jean Martin, she's a person that, in undergrad, my sister, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's seen it and she saw it and she was there.
Mm-hmm.
Deborah Roberts. I was at school with Deborah Roberts. You know,
Mm-hmm.
all these amazing people, right? Doa, right? Heather Phillips, right? Nava, right? Maya, I see you.
Mm-hmm.
Not alone. I mean, shout out to the Skowhegan family, 2015.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not alone in this, right?
That's
It's
where we.
not
That's where we met.
me.
That's where we met.
Yeah, the first dinner,
Yeah.
right? And Nancy Davenport. These people, these have affected my life greatly.
Mm.
So it's my responsibility.
This last image is of your studio, and
Uh-oh. Yeah.
yeah, what does this mean? What might this mean?
Yeah. What might it mean? It means that I don't have a studio anymore.
Right.
That's what it means.
Right.
The day before everything left to come up to the queue, my studio was absorbed. So any Philly folk or anyone, hey, I'm looking for a studio. James is jammed up. So
Adrian Piper said once, though, the studio is really beautiful. Comments she made when I was my time at Skowhegan, besides working with everybody, was just to listen to those iPods with
mm,
all those different artist presentations. And she had a beautiful one, Adrian Piper, where she said, if you can't or don't have a studio at a certain time, use
mm,
drawing as your studio as a way of keeping the work active until you can get the place to actually construct it, to put it together.
mm,
And I feel in that way, it's like the studio is in your mind and in your heart in as much as it is in real space.
mm,
So yeah, you'll get your studio. That's going to happen. It's like a nice homage to this really amazing space you had in Philadelphia and West Philly. But
mm,
you're going to have to get a new studio because uh, you're selling out, and you're gonna need to have a space to make more work because all this work's going to disappear in no time at all.
I'm clearly gifted, with the space and sanctifying that way. That was the last thing that I actually made, if you can consider it being, a creation in that space, and I had to mark it down. Also, shout outs to Yuri Henley. He knows me by my middle name. Thank you, brother. Thank you. Um, wow. Hmm.
So Lily, that's it with the slides.
Okay, great. Yeah. If anyone has any questions for Odili or James, feel free to drop them in the chat. We can spend a little bit of time taking questions now. All right, so Nancy Davenport asked if you could talk about the sculpture Fred.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. Um, do we have an image of the
Let me go back to the share. I'll just 1 second.
Yeah, Chairman Fred Hampton, right? Black
Right.
Panther Party, Chicago. Um, a tree that was it's a piece of a trunk, right? It was twice as big as it was. Um, this whole, the dissection of a black body, autopsy, right? There's an entry wound. The entry wounds in the autopsy are or holes and X's and O's, right? But the spigot on the side of his head is an exit and right, it's an exit entry wound, right? Um, this this piece, wow. If you see the piece or you come across the piece, in the show, inside into the grain in the form of the piece, there's a heart. It's a naturally formed heart that's inside. But it's petrified, right? So it ruined a couple of chisels, right? Wood ruined steel, right? Absolutely. Um, I tussled with it during my performance. It was still kind of at a certain stage where I didn't want to really say that it was finished.
So
But
you're still working on it in the
yeah,
performance. You're still
yeah,
working on this. Okay.
I was still working on it, right? And shaping, right? Still understanding. It's still so much that it was like it has to say, right? And I'm just dealing with it. But I definitely tussled for hours with this piece.
Mhm.
um, Underneath, I don't think anyone, no, maybe a couple people know, but underneath, that it's sitting on, right, the neck. If you turn it up, it's a copy of Amma, right? Because I feel that they're related because they are in a similar type state. So underneath, there's like this burnt image of Amma. Yeah, Fred. Mm, mhm.
We have another question from Karina who asked if you were to continue the series of homages to African American athletes, who would be next?
Mm, yeah, Wilma Rudolph, right? Runner. I would also go internationally with it, right? Folks of the diaspora, not of the diaspora. Um, Marathon runners, right? Tequila, right? Won the marathon. What was it? The Rome Marathon in 60
Mhm.
barefoot, right? And so and he ran it in Tokyo in 64, right? And they're like, but you just put some shoes on. You had a sponsor, right? But running a marathon in barefooted, right? Um, those 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 images, those people, possibly boxing, right? Boxers is sweet science, right? The athletes, it's so much, right? Even Kareem, yes, a basketball player, right? But he's an academic and he's an intellectual. He's very spiritual. And documentaries and books and right. So there's so many things, right, to one's life, right? Not just the physicality of sport, right? But it's also, this, with sports, or with certain type of sports, um, this notion where it's like, oh, it's just brainless, just the body emotion, oh, body, natural, it's a natural, right? But, it's 10% body and it's 90% mental, right? And doing the performance, that was a mental struggle for me. I'm not gonna front like say, oh, it was all good and I just breezed right through it. No, not at all. So many spirits were jumping off in my head at each hour passed, right? And it was rough. But that struggle, that turmoil is a great struggle, right? It's something that as long as I can breathe, I'll continue to do and celebrate that, right? To be alive, right? To create and make work, to have people like interested to even listen to me talk about my work or anything. I'm completely humbled by it. It's amazing. So thank you.
You actually, I want to ask you a question about the materials you use, and I've addressed it a little bit before earlier in the talk, but you have a proclivity of going towards used materials and found materials, and there might be an obviousness to that relationship of used and old and history and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something is this something that you see yourself continuing to be able to just work with materials that have specific histories? Is it something you gravitate to
Yes,
naturally?
it's me, right? It's me. It just watching my grandfather work, who's a master plumber, right? Like third generation. And watching my dad, architect, a builder, right?
Your dad was an architect.
Yeah.
Yes.
And my dad didn't want to be a plumber, right? He wanted to be an architect. My dad taught me the plumbing trade and architecture, but I didn't want to be a plumber or architect. But I really consider them as artists. They were just born at a different time. You know, I've watched, my granddad and my dad, you know, I would help them. They would say, well, Jimbo, you just sit here and watch me. You watch,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I did. I just watched. And the materials that I use are trade materials. I mean, object maker, sculptor, right? I'm a builder, and that's something where I'm in this in between, right? And it's something, the respect for my hands, my left hand and my right hand, and how they work together, but they're totally different from each other. But they create these compositions, right? And it's something that I'm amazed that I can continue to do this, and it's fun. So yes, it's serious, yes, it's art, but it's play, that I enjoy, and
Mm-hmm.
it helps my spirit and my mind for sure.
Mm-hmm.
There are no other questions, but perhaps there is a nice comment that is perhaps a good place to end. From Nava, who said, "Thank you for this, James and Odilee. James's humanity is unmatched, and this rare quality shows in all he does. Among many things, I appreciate his dedication to labor and craft, associations that still are looked upon as pejoratives in art. There were some words shared on beauty tonight, and in many ways, James's craft and generous depiction of process and labor as subtext is a source of beauty in his work. And importantly, the embodiment of labor is beauty and suffering in his work."
Thank you,
Thank you,
Nava.
Nava, for that
Thank you.
comment.
Wow.
And thank you, James and Odilee, for this conversation, for your work on this exhibition, for entering and being such great parts of the Q family. It's really been a pleasure working with you both on this exhibition.
Thank you for inviting me to just to find James. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you to the Q Foundation and everyone that's helped this happen. I appreciate you and I love you and everyone. You know, those who are here and who are not here with us.
Mm.
Thank you for the support, and I'll continue to work, right? And hopefully, we'll break bread soon
Yeah. At your new studio.
at my new studio.
Yes.